And hello, and welcome to Walk the Talk Show with Waylon Lewis, coming to you live, or not live if you're watching this later, from Boulder, Colorado. And I'm here with sexpert Wendy Strgar, who talks about sex and love and all of it from a kind of spiritual and environmentally responsible perspective. So as we always do, we start with a bow of mutual respect and a reminder of our missions, a bow of respect to Wendy as well as to all of you viewers. And viewers, you can offer a bow both to your own self and your own relationship with relationships, as well as to Wendy, and if you feel like it, myself. So thank you, Wendy, for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
And then I was asking earlier if you could possibly lead us in a brief meditation instruction and meditation practice that we could practice either on our own or in a relationship.
So I think actually a really good meditation practice that we could just touch on would be just to sort of come into our body and get out of our mind. So if everybody can close their eyes and actually feel your seat, feel the weight of your hips against the back of the chair and the bottom of the chair, and sink into your pelvis. Just feel your pelvis for just a second. And it might be helpful if you could take 3 deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth, and just actually watch the stream of air coming in through your nose, out through your mouth. And now with that weighted feeling in your hips, imagine a ball of light traveling up your spine. And as you get to your navel center, imagine that light expanding and really feel your belly. Feel all the organs in your belly. Just if you start to get distracted, pay attention to your breath. And then feeling that light radiating up to the back of your chest, to the back of your heart center. And take a few breaths into that space. Feel the weight of your ribs. Feel your heart. Listen for your heartbeat. And then that light traveling up through the base of your skull. Feel your shoulders slide down your back. And feel that light slowly climbing to the center of your brain. Feel your brain bathed in this light. And feel the space at the very top of your head radiating that light out. And feel what it feels like to just feel your body for a minute. And notice just in 40 seconds how quiet you can get when you turn off all the outside devices and just turn in. And now slowly open your eyes. Notice where you are around you. And give thanks that you live in such an incredible body.
Well, thank you, Wendy.
Yeah. I find when I do this work, and I try to do it the moment I wake up, and I do it again before I go to bed, and if I'm having a bad day, and I do it in the middle of the day. No, we think we can solve all our problems and do all this work out there, but it's never out there where anything really shifts. If you can't get it to shift in here, you might as well just give up out there.
Right. Yeah, it's apt that you say that because I do, I grew up in this Buddhist family and I meditate a few times a day, and today was a very rare day where I felt mentally burned out, and I immediately, the mind and the ego and the just burnout immediately makes me and probably others out there say, what do I need? Do I need food? Do I need sex? Do I need a vacation? Do I need hot springs? But really, it's just you need to reconnect with yourself, as you just walked us through.
Yeah.
So thank you. So today we're going to talk with Wendy about, it's a very Hemingway kind of discussion, love, sex, and death. We're going to talk specifically around sex, around orgasm, and the kind of issues or problems around that. I don't have any problems around it, but other people I've heard have problems about it. That's a joke. Awkward. Things
A
just
lot
got
of people
awkward.
have problems with orgasm, actually.
Yeah. Many people I've heard have problems around orgasm. And then also apparently it's National Masturbation Month. I don't know who decides that. I think that was probably Obama.
No, actually, it's very old how that was decided. Jocelyn Elders in like 1997
Mm,
made this statement before she lost her job, that all kids should learn about orgasm, that, sexual health would be an important thing, and that masturbation, no, they shouldn't learn about orgasm, they should learn about masturbation, which is essentially learning about orgasm.
right.
And anyway, it was just so horrible that she said that they created this National Masturbation Month around that statement she made in
It
like
was horrible. She said that as in like it was so controversial. She said that.
yeah, I mean, just, she was like the Surgeon General or whatever, in the
I see.
government, and
I see.
we're
Good
only
for
allowed
her.
to talk about sex in this country if it's pornographic.
Right. Well, not
Which,
even pornographic. It just, if it's in a movie that's rated whatever, yeah, I guess maybe porn. Porn seems like a taboo still, from my point of view. But yeah, so let's talk about that. So when I was a kid, I personally love the internet, partially because it's changed the dialogue, obviously for better and worse, but it's increased the dialogue, I guess, is a way to put it around masturbation, particularly where there's this website, Reddit, that I'm on all the time looking for fun stuff to share with our readers. I love Reddit, and I've been super active on it for years. And they talk about masturbation without any sense of shame all the time. And I kind of love that. When I was a kid, masturbation was much more about like hiding your Playboy beneath your bed or whatever. And it was kind of a shameful you definitely didn't talk about it.
yeah, and it's interesting how, things have shifted, and then in some ways they haven't shifted,
Yeah.
like there's, I think people still have a lot of shame. I think that there's a lot of people, married couples, who can't say that word masturbation to each other,
Right.
let alone do it with each other, or do it in front of each other. So,
Or do it away from each other. I mean, what's wrong with doing it by yourself, right?
well, there's nothing wrong with it, but I think that that it's the first act that we learn. It's the most common sexual act on the planet, and I always tell young people that it's like if you don't know how to find your own pleasure and orgasm, it's really hard to have
Mm,
somebody else give that to you. Well, and there's two reasons for that. There's can be this sort of projection, right? If you find your first orgasm with your first girlfriend or boyfriend, then you think they gave it to you. That gives them a ridiculous amount of responsibility that's not really theirs. And so there's that. And
uh,
then the other thing is that, that's a very subtle thing, a millimeter to the right or to the left, a touch horizontally or diagonally, and suddenly you find something that somebody else probably couldn't find for you. So you have a lot of, that kind of self-knowledge is incredibly empowering in terms of finding pleasure with other people that you love.
yeah. Oh, that's a great point. So why do you think, I mean, I kind of don't really get where that shame started around masturbation. Is it
It
just that we're
started,
all, yeah.
if you look back at history, and sexual
Mhm.
history, I think is some of the most interesting history there is. But 100 years ago, boys were masturbation was so taboo. I mean, doctors used to say that you would get mentally ill if you did it, or
Right.
if you had erections. If boys had erections, they would put these terrible sharp bands on a boy's penis so it would cut into him if he would get an erection. I mean, this isn't that long ago. It's like 3, 4 generations ago that this was like commonly how we were thought of. You know, I mean, there's that funny movie that came out last year about hysteria. I think it was called Hysteria, and about women and masturbation, right? And they would go to this doctor because they were hysterical. That was the diagnosis, and he would actually. That was like the first invention of a vibrator. Actually,
Right.
this movie, and
Well, tell us that. That's actually kind of fascinating. Vibrators were invented so because doctors' hands were getting tired because they were manually.
Well, that's in that movie, but originally they were sold in Sears Roebuck as these huge apparatus that like practically filled a room, right? But it was like a medical device, right? Because you could go to the doctor and you could be treated like that. So, I mean, when you think about those contexts and you expand to a more global view, of how, I mean, people can lose their life for having sexual pleasure in many countries in the world today. People lose their life today if they identify outside of sexual norms that people consider okay. I mean, we think it's a struggle here, but in other places, people are being killed, stoned, because, I mean, I know a girl whose best friend was killed because she kissed a boy. So that's happening right now today. So you wonder, it's like in some ways when you think about compassion practice, meditation, compassion practice, and Tonglen and all those kinds of things, we say when you really understand what compassion means, that we really are all connected. And I really believe that. I believe that if other people are suffering, then on some level, especially if it's millions of people who are suffering, there's no way that we are not feeling that experience of suffering. And so I think that that applies in this deeply profound way to sexuality. When you consider sexuality in a global way and just how much shame and how much pain is associated with it on a global frame, it's no wonder that there's this shame residue that we still feel, even though Reddit will talk about it. And so
Yeah.
I think that female sexuality in particular is still the thing that is holding us back from an evolved world. When you consider how many young girls have their clitorises cut off before they are even a sexual being, you're talking about 100 million. Over 100 million women on this planet have had that removed. And so, you ask about shame, it's not even just history. It's like right now on this planet, so many people suffer because the truth is we are human sexual beings and we just can't fucking deal with it.
Right. Well said, sister. You keep going. I'm just sitting here.
So, when you think about that and you take that to the problem women have with orgasms, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
there's this kind of global residue about how somehow that must be wrong.
So Wendy, let me just jump in because otherwise I'm going to start reading a novel over here. It'll be a sexual novel I'll start reading, but let's just make this a dialogue. So I definitely in no way am saying that shame is over. I'm just referring to how rapidly, at least here in the West, things have evolved in I regard as a generally healthy direction. Obviously, porn and things can be healthy or unhealthy. Everything can. But you're an expert in this stuff. How can we help the entire world? And I love that you're bringing up the rest of the world. I mean, it's profound what's happening still. How can we have a more enlightened relationship? Let's just start with masturbation, whether we're men or women.
I think, at the very basis, when we were doing that little brief meditation about feeling our body,
Mm-hmm.
and just like feeling the weight of our body, and actually listening, getting quiet enough to hear our own heartbeat, right? I mean,
Right.
So when you start to live in your body and you're out of your head, then that's actually a really natural segue into like giving yourself permission to wonder about who you are as a sexual person, right?
Right.
And for all different reasons, this is a different discussion, and someday maybe we'll invite my friend who wrote Your Brain on Sex, who's the master of this, Stanley Siegel. But
Hmm.
it's like we all have different triggers that bring us pleasure, and fetishes. I mean, all those things come from something, and really, it's our subconscious mind trying to heal something that we might not even have words for. I mean, that's a lot of how sexuality works, because when you consider coming into your sexuality in your early adolescence, sexuality is the part of us, the deepest part of us that's trying to give us pleasure. So the way so how it's trying to give us pleasure subconsciously is by healing these things that have given us pain. Anyway, it's very odd, and I don't
Yeah.
fully understand it, but I think about that a lot. And so if you can give yourself permission to wonder about those things, and give yourself permission to allow privately yourself to experience whatever that is that turns you on. Many people never allow themselves that. Just that fantasy, that thought, and
Right.
that you at the same time are feeling your body and allow your hands, which are some of the most beautiful works of art on the planet. Our hands have more nerve endings and more capacity to manipulate. I mean, you don't really need sex toys, but if you can't use your hands, fine, but you allow yourself this time to find out what pleasure means in your body, and call it
Yeah.
a meditation, but give yourself permission to have that experience. Because if you can't do that with yourself, then how do you expect, especially in this world of hookups that you guys live in, how could you expect that you could do that with somebody who's a stranger, you
Right.
know? So, you have to develop that level of feeling good and safe with yourself so that you can start to begin to open and be vulnerable in that way in a relationship. And I'm
I
not
love
just
that.
saying that's just true for hookups. That's true about a lot of people in long-term marriages. If they don't have that safety in their own with themselves, with their own capacity for pleasure,
Hmm.
they feel ashamed that they have it, or they feel like they're doing it wrong, or something's wrong with them because they think this, then the door is locked before they even get in the bedroom.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I.
So as someone who, I mean, I'm not even trying to be jokey. I don't feel like I have that many hangups around masturbation or sex. So in a way, I'm kind of the wrong person to talk about this. I feel like it's kind of fun and awesome, and my only issue with it is I'd like more of it all the time, please. So I'm gonna like go on eBay and find that Sears Roebuck masturbation machine and put it in my basement, since apparently it's pretty big.
Uh,
But
that's really like historic. I mean, you could get something that's much more, up to date and probably would work a lot better for you.
yeah, I'm into secondhand though, and
You should try Tanga.
no, I'm good. I like my hands, and I
Tanga is a
like.
really good device for men. In fact, when I first got it in the office, I thought to myself, oh, I wish I had a penis to try this, because it looked really fun.
Well,
So that's
you could
a tip
buy a
for
penis
your
and
listeners.
then try it out. So wait, what is this thing you're recommending for the
For
gentleman out
men,
there?
it's a male toy, and it's called Tenga, Tenga, and it's this masturbation device which has all these different feels
Right,
and textures, and
right,
um, looks super fun. It's made in Japan, and there's all
of
kinds of weird
course.
sexual stuff going on in Japan.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah,
Really
so I don't really understand why any guy would need that, because masturbation is something we're pretty good at. But maybe we have a lot of shame around masturbation. But for those who aren't good at or want some fun, go get that toy. Sounds
yeah.
great. Um, but so why are we so, I think men and women maybe, why are we so historically shameful around masturbation? Why is it such a kind of taboo subject that if we do talk about it at all, it's sort of giggling and
Well, I mean,
awkward?
because think about it. I just gave you the medical history
Right.
and the global history, and then
Yeah.
there's the religious history. I mean, if you were
Yeah.
associated with most religions in the world, depending on how extremist you are, it's like off limits. you know, there are many people who consider the forbidden fruit in the Adam and Eve garden is orgasm, you know,
Uh-huh.
and there's a book called Transcendent Sexuality. I can't remember, a researcher in California wrote it, and it's actually a pretty interesting history. But you know, the idea is that when you are really having profound, intimate pleasure, orgasm, sexuality with somebody, you are pretty close to God right there. A lot of people report feeling God in that exchange and having an experience of the supernatural, or kind of traveling through time and space, or all different kinds of experiences associated with that. And I think that that was one of the reasons that religion kind of made it off limits, because then, you know, religion wouldn't be necessary to have that communion with God. You know, you can have it yourself through really profound release.
That's
And
amazing.
I've had that experience many times. That is holy. You know, I mean, there's some people who talk about World Orgasm Day. I don't know if you know, I think that's in October. And the idea is that they want all these people to orgasm at the same moment and
Uh-huh.
send this orgasmic energy to healing the planet,
Kind
because
of like
that, that
Wendy, kind of like that scene in Amélie when the entire town of Paris is getting off at the same time, right? Yeah,
exactly, that's global.
yeah, I love it. So,
So anyway, I think that's all the
yeah,
reasons. But you know, not to get too stuck on masturbation, because I think, you
sure.
know, you know, I think, you know, the problem isn't, certainly that's a basic problem that, you know, maybe if you solve that problem for everybody, sexuality in general would be much better for everybody also. Because certainly if you don't sort of carve out a relationship to that foundational part of your sexuality,
Yeah.
then any kind of intimacy that you try to have with other people is definitely affected by it.
Well, so yeah, as you're saying, so we can move on. Past masturbation, it's been 3.5 minutes. That's long enough for anybody to work on the masturbation subject. So actually, it's been like 15 minutes. So that was a good long time for masturbation. I hope you've all had a good time. Now let's talk about orgasm. So apparently, I was talking with my staff here, and it's really fascinating. You know, there was a discussion about the hangups people have about orgasms. I've certainly been with people who don't really have ready access to being able to orgasm their entire life. And then, you know, also a lot about faking orgasms because they don't want their partner to feel like they need to get them to that point. So, what do you have to, what truth do you have to drop down on us about orgasm?
Well, so I think it's important statistically just to sort of look at that, you know, not being able to achieve orgasm is
Yeah.
actually just about as common as having orgasm.
Wow.
So, you know, it's like it's a huge issue. And you know, like you know, Meg was saying before, you know, that usually you find that literature about female orgasm, but the truth is that if you look at the ways that orgasm, you know, has the male orgasm, whether it's premature ejaculation, which oftentimes is not a very good orgasm for men, or you know, erectile dysfunction, which would not allow a man to orgasm. You know, those issues are paired along with women having pain with sex, having really low libido and no interest in sex, and with the inability to orgasm. You know, so
Hmm.
you know, if you were to look at the statistics, men and women are not that far off with those problems. You know, they look a little different, but they're more similar than they are different. And you know, I think a lot of things we were talking about masturbation come to play about having an orgasm, because here's the thing about orgasm. The part of your brain that controls orgasm cannot function if you're worried about having an orgasm. So
Uh-huh.
if you're anxious and worried, or if you're ashamed, or if you feel like a man shouldn't be responsible for you to find pleasure, or if you're having any of these weird thoughts that make you that you know, basically you're shutting down the part of your brain that can actually move towards orgasm. So
Right.
that said, the other thing that's important to know is that you can't make anybody else have an orgasm. nobody can make anybody have an orgasm. So, you're laughing maybe because you feel like you have made women have an orgasm. I don't know. Are
No,
you
I'm just,
laughing at
yeah,
that?
I'm just having a lot of thoughts as you talk.
Here's the thing. Somebody has to be a willing, consensual participant for an orgasm to come up in them.
Is that a message directly to me? Because frankly,
No,
that seems a little offensive. No, I'm kidding.
the
Um,
thing is that
yeah,
orgasm is a surrender.
right.
It's the way that we surrender to something bigger than our thinking. So that's why you asked me about meditation for sex.
Yeah, I
You
love it.
Well, but it's like it's not really meditation for sex, but the more you can learn to just feel your body and
Uh-huh.
not be caught up in your head, then
Yeah.
that skill would transfer to this place where you can surrender to letting your body lead you to orgasm. But if
So,
you're like anxious and
yeah,
you have a lot of bad feelings or shame about orgasm,
yeah.
then that part of your brain is keeping the part of your brain that needs to respond to orgasm from acting.
But can I ask a question?
Hmm.
So, orgasm doesn't just seem to be about like a release or a relaxation. I mean, to me, you can have all the neurotic thoughts in the world, and that can help create the tension that then creates the release. So, telling people they have to be relaxed, otherwise they're not going to orgasm, would seem to be more stress for most people. Like,
No, I'm not saying they have to be relaxed.
okay, good.
I'm saying that anxiety, like, about orgasm,
Yeah.
anxiety about being able to orgasm is
Hmm.
keeping them from orgasming.
Right, but so
If
how
you're
do they
having
deal?
thoughts
So
about
Wendy,
fantasies,
let me ask you a question once in a while. So, how then do people work directly with that anxiety?
what I always talk about is just can you bring yourself into the present moment?
Uh-huh.
And what I was saying earlier, about like feeling your body, like actually just focusing on sensate. That's actually a cure that Masters and Johnson, one of the most famous kind of sexual therapists in the world, kind of revolutionized sexuality in the 50s. They had this whole sensate focus thing. And they would train couples to just think about pressure, heat, and stroke, you know? So, how do you like it, right? Like in just those three capacities. But
Hmm.
if you also allow yourself to play with this idea of fantasy, or what it is that's turning you on about, I mean, that's the reason illicit sex is so popular and works so well for people who often can orgasm. They can when it's illicit because there's this whole tension thing going on about getting caught. I mean, you remember when you were a teenager and are your parents going to walk in, or you're parked in an empty parking lot and is anybody going to see you in the back seat? I mean,
Right.
there's this thrill factor that definitely escalates, but that's a different kind of anxiety than am I going to be able to orgasm? That's a
Right.
totally different anxiety.
So if you're feeling that kind of anxiety, Wendy, you can just focus on those three things, what was it, heat, stroke, and something?
Yeah, it's this idea of sensate focus. So it's just about bringing yourself into your body
I
and
love that.
feeling how somebody's touching you. Just that alone. I mean, when couples haven't had sex for many months, I'll sometimes talk to them or I've written about this and I say to them, can you just have a physical conversation? Can you just stop talking about it and get out of your head for 10 minutes and just say how you want to be touched? And
Mhm.
just have that feeling. Just feel that feeling. And not to get to some sexual orgasm place, but
Right.
just to allow somebody to touch you and that you can let yourself feel that and take it in.
So what you just said is pretty profound. You can let go of that goal of orgasm and just kind of have fun and practice
Well,
in a way.
that's pretty much how most people succeed in getting there. You
Right.
know,
That's
you give
great.
up the idea that there's somewhere to get to, and
Yeah.
just by experiencing what's happening, your body can take you there. Everybody has the capacity for orgasm.
Mhm.
It's what happens up here
Mhm.
that prevents us from having that experience.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I feel like speaking personally, once in a while you're with someone who, when they're their attitude towards sex is just as businesslike and organized and goal-oriented as perhaps their attitude towards work or whatever it is, and that doesn't allow for that kind of humor or play or release, perhaps.
Well, and it's also like, that's people who approach sexuality that way tend to have a fairly narrow and rigid way of getting there, right? Like they know they do this, they do this, they do this, and then it works.
Right.
Well, and so a lot of couples fall into that rut of, okay, well, you got to do this, and then you got to do this, and then you got to do this, and then that takes all the play out of it, like you said, and also, there's a guy who has written a lot of great books about sex, and his name is escaping me, but I'm just thinking of this topic. He talks about leftover sex. And a lot of people have this thing called leftover sex where there's so many things that they take off the table that all they have left is this leftover stuff, which is usually stuff they do over and over and over again because it's worked. But, they don't have this sort of spirit of experimenting. I mean, I'll talk about myself for a minute. I've been having sex with the same guy for 30 years, and I don't know what's going to happen when I get going with him. Like anything could happen because, we don't have any kind of pre-programmed thing. And a lot of times it's really crazy, the shit that happens. And I think, oh, God, did that just happen? But so, when you give yourself permission to actually
Wendy, let's keep focusing on that part. I love that. So you're in this long relationship, 30 years.
Yeah,
someone who doesn't have a healthy...
April 14th was my 30th anniversary.
Congratulations to both of you. So you're in this...
walk-in 1 hour sex that I do not know what's going to happen.
And you're in this situation where, like, a bachelor like me would probably, like, I'm very intimidated by the idea of, like, a 30-year marriage, going to bed with someone again and again and again. It sounds kind of like hell. But you guys have this playfulness. You've made it fresh every day. So how do you kind of keep that sense of openness?
Well, I think, like I said, partly because I'm not having leftover sex, right? Like everything's on the table, and I feel so safe in that relationship that even when I do things that I would be mortified to tell you about.
Like what?
I'm not telling you.
No, I know.
I do things that I wouldn't say out loud afterward.
Like what? Wendy, like...
but I'm safe to do it. And, sometimes, the thing about long-term relationships is that they create a container. I like to think about relationships as a container that holds two people to become their best selves. And so, when both people have enough room to really become who they want to be, then that relationship is not stifling, it's enlarging. It's a safety net, right? You can fall flat on your face and somebody's going to still love you. Or you can do crazy stuff in a sexual setting that you might be afraid to perform because they're not going to judge you for doing that. And we don't talk about it after we do it. And in fact, sometimes even there's like this distancing that we do. Like he goes to his corner, I go to my corner, and we have to figure out how to come back into this 30-year marriage, right? Like paying the bills and our teenagers and paying for prom tickets for our kids, or you know what I mean? It's like we go to this extreme place, and then we have to figure out how to contain it. And I think that's a lot of why so many long-term couples are afraid of that kind of sex, because they think, somebody who has kids with me, somebody who I'm living this life and taking to these dinner parties, how can I have that kind of sex with that person? It would be too shameful. But it's like, almost like it happens in a different compartment of that big container, and it's not like we don't do that every day, all the time. But we know that when we go into the bedroom in these kind of trysts that we have, we can do it.
I love that. I think it's super romantic and kind of playful. It's really delightful to hear about. I'd love to hear more about it, but maybe off camera. So
So anyway,
Yeah.
I want to just say for the record, and I really want people to know that there's
Mhm.
all kinds of literature that says that familiarity, that long-term relationships kill sex. And that's really a bunch of bullshit. That is not what kills sex.
Amen.
In many
Love it.
ways, long-term relationships are the safest place. If you're doing all the work to make the relationship work, that is where you're going to have the wildest sex, if you give yourself permission to do it. But that's an inner job. You know,
Yeah.
it's not the relationship that makes you do that. It's like you having the courage to really explore who are you as an erotic person. And
Yeah.
I'm pretty deeply erotic. So I do things that I will not tell you on camera, Waylon,
Right.
that because I give myself permission to know those things.
Yeah, and I mean, I've had maybe one long-term relationship, and I mean, there was that deepening quality of intimacy where sex did kind of expand and become this sort of different universe, which was interesting. But I was scared of that, so I
It's
quickly.
very
Yeah.
different than when you have sex with somebody that you just meet and that you
Uh-huh.
might never see again.
Right.
That's more like a show, you
Yeah.
know? That's more like, here, this is what I'll show you. And
Right.
I think a lot of times that's when women fake orgasms too, because they want to
Yeah.
seem like they can do it, but they don't really want to be vulnerable enough to give somebody access to that. And, I have some of my orgasms are so intense that I think, like, if I was thinking, what do I look like now?
Right.
That, like, that would be, I couldn't have that orgasm
Right.
if I had any part of me wondering what that would look like to
How's my
somebody.
hair? How's my makeup?
It's like,
Yeah.
whatever. You can't think that and
Yeah.
have the kind of orgasm that people really want to have.
I love it. So everyone out there should masturbate a lot more, or a lot more consistently, regard it as a meditation practice, and then take that kind of intimacy and being present with one's own feelings.
I don't think you should use words like a lot more. I think you
Uh-huh.
should say
Good.
that, if you would allow yourself to become comfortable with the fact that as a human being, one of the very first things you are is an erotic human being. And if
Mhm.
you could just be okay with that, you would actually be able to be not only having much better sex yourself, with yourself and other people, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't be so condemning of other people's sexuality. So you wouldn't want to kill people because they kissed a boy in other countries or
Right.
because they call themselves gay, right? It's like we react to sexuality in other people because
Yeah.
we can't deal with our own sexuality.
No, I mean, you're 100% right. That's why you're on the show, because you're the expert. I love that. We put up this infographic recently where the most kind of, I haven't read it lately, unfortunately, but it was about repression, sexual kind of deviance, or whatever you want to call it, which isn't necessarily deviant, was most common in areas where the religion or the
Exactly.
politics perhaps was the most fundamentalist.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so it's like what we can't embrace in ourselves,
Right.
we hate in other people.
Right.
And,
Well said.
and to the degree that sexuality is so, even though we talk about it on Reddit and pornography takes up 20% of our internet space, that's not the sexuality that people want. Just
Uh-huh.
for the record. I mean, maybe some people do, and I don't want to judge those people.
Right. Well, I
But
also think, porn can be
if
different
you
things.
could have the kind of
Well,
sex I'm
uh-huh.
having,
Uh-huh.
I think that people, when they
Well,
seek
so is that an offer
orgasm
to
and they
anyone,
seek
or?
deep connection with other people, no. Well, my point is that,
You're breaking up.
and there
Sorry.
was this
Yeah.
interesting. Are you losing me?
I can hear you, but I think, yeah, it's breaking up a little bit.
Um,
Go ahead.
I was going to say that I think that when people seek relationship and sexual intimacy, they are really craving that deepest connection in that universal kind of way that happens in orgasmic connection.
Mhm.
And did you see that viral video this English guy just made it about how you're looking down and you're missing your life? It's this whole kind of rhyming poem
Hmm.
um,
No.
about Actually, you should look for it. I guess
Yeah, it
it's
sounds great.
viral or whatever. But I just feel like we do this fake connecting, and we do this kind of hookup sex, and it's not filling us, and it's not connecting us in the way that our hearts really need to be
Yeah,
filled and connected.
yeah.
And it takes work to get that stuff that we really want. Um, but that's actually the whole reason we're on the planet, is for that work.
Yeah, and
That's
it's
the
not just, I think like you said, Wendy, with your husband, it's not just work, it's like play too. It's playfulness, right?
Totally. But it's like I don't want people to think that I'm like in some kind of fantasy euphoric relationship. I still fight with my husband. He
Sure.
still drives me crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
there's pieces that work and pieces that don't work. I mean,
I'm
I've been
sure,
in that relationship for many, many years, and it's not
yeah,
like you just get there and suddenly like you know how to do it. It's like
yeah,
you're still learning how to do it all the time.
well said. And I'm sure, I think we need to wrap up. We're 10 minutes over, but I'm sure also, I know it's hard to imagine, but you drive him nuts occasionally.
As you could imagine.
Once, no, I can't imagine it. I love you. But
Um,
Wendy
how annoying.
Strgar, was that?
I can be very annoying.
I don't think so. So Wendy Strgar, thank you so much. Good, clean love, and we'll put a bunch of links in uh, the blog on
And
elephantjournal.com.
we'll actually
With
post a bunch of stuff for you.
yeah, well, great, yeah, and we love sharing up your blogs. But we'll put a bunch of links that you've referred to, different blogs, and then you can find more videos, and including another conversation we had with Wendy on youtube.com/Waylon H. Lewis, and you can find us on SoundCloud. So you can, jerk off in your bathroom while listening to Wendy talk to you, if you'd
Or
like.
not.
Yeah, or not. All right. Well, thank you so much, Wendy. It's always interesting. Okay.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Waylon.
Thank you. I'm bowing to you out of affection.